Somebody to Love by Queen, requested by Danny on your home for pure rock music. Danny, appreciate you listening. Thank you for keeping it locked on FM 89. Thank you also for your loyal listenership. Dearly appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Pulaski, back and better than ever with Sleepless with Steve, the show that brings you great film talk punctuated with a little bit of rock music for good measure. Joining me again for the second hour, the lovely DJ GiaMaria. How are you?
Still hanging in, Steve.
Still hanging in. You're like I don't know what's worse. The fact that I got, I don't know what's worse here. The fact that I got to kind of listen to you expound about movies or the 1 o'clock hour.
I think I'm going to say the 1 o'clock hour.
The 1 o'clock hour. You had a long day today?
I did actually have a long day. I had a job interview, and I was here for second helpings 12 to 3 p.m., and then I had to go to work for a couple hours, and then I had rehearsal, and here I am.
You've had a full plate. You've had
Definitely.
A full plate, and you're coming back for seconds.
Literally.
Good Lord, oh my God. I appreciate you sticking around, because right now, like I said, I kind of go into industry talk the second hour. That's usually what I do. I usually give my reviews the first hour of new releases, and then I try to segue as smoothly as I can into the second hour to talk about the industry. I'm going to save the incredible bomb that was King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. I'm going to save that for next hour. I'm going to go into kind of like the financial linguistics of that and talk about why this is yet another failure for Warner Brothers. Again, Warner Brothers is like the king of box office failure in recent time. But now we're switching gears, though. We're going to talk about a guy named Jason Blum, who I assume that not many people listening know who he is, though I would argue he's responsible for maybe some of your favorite horror movies and some of your favorite movies of the last couple years. Jason Blum is the founder of Blumhouse Productions, which specializes in producing micro-budget movies. Movies for about less than $5 million. And now I know you're saying, you're probably like, these are the movies that get played in art houses that don't really get seen by a general public. I'm just going to run through the last few movies that Jason Blum's name is on. These are movies that were released by Blumhouse Productions, his company, in addition to him having a producer credit on these films. I'm just going to work backwards from recent time to about 2015. I'm not going to read all of them. I'm going to read the highlights, though. He is the producer on Get Out, Slight, Ouija, Origin of Evil, Split, The Purge Election Year, The Purge Anarchy, The Purge, the first film, Lowriders, which came out this weekend, In a Valley of Violence, Hush, Paranormal Activity, all 6 movies, I correct myself, The Visit, Sinister 1 and 2, The Gift, and Unfriended. And that's just the last few years. He's produced a lot, even in addition to another franchise that I forgot to mention, Insidious as well.
Wow.
This guy has his name stamped on a lot of money-making productions, and it makes sense, too. I'm going to double back to some of those movies I talked about. Get Out had a $4.5 million budget. It made $214 million worldwide. Split had a $9 million budget. It made $275.9 million worldwide. Ouija Origin of Evil had a $9 million budget. It made $81.7 million. And then finally, the movie that put Blumhouse and Jason Blum on the map, Paranormal Activity, had a budget of $15,000. It grossed $139.4 million. So this really is Blum's forte. This is his baby. And he specializes. The commonality between all those movies I just read, they didn't have budgets higher than about $10 million. And he has made these movies, he has produced these movies, and he has made a killing on nearly all of them. Have you seen any of those films?
I have actually. I got really excited when you started naming names. I have seen Get Out. I've seen Insidious. I've seen parts of Split. I've seen The Purge. And I'm trying to think of the other one that was on that list. And The Conjuring.
You've seen the Paranormal Activity films, too?
I've seen the first one.
You've seen the first one.
Yeah.
Now, another question I have for you, too, just a little bit of a random question as well. As far as these, like, horror movies go, like The Purge and everything, and Get Out or whatnot, do you like the new horror movies, or are you sort of clinging, because I know you said you like older comedies, do you cling more towards the older horror films, or do you like some of the new stuff that's coming out?
Honestly, I like the new stuff and what's coming out. I feel like I get more scares out of the new stuff compared to the old stuff. Like, I look back at stuff like The Exorcism or It, and I'm just like, not the new It, but the old It.
Yeah, Stephen King's It, yes indeed.
Right, yeah. So when I look at that stuff, I just feel like that's child's play compared to what we have now. Like, we have Grudges, we have Devils, we have Resurrections, blood, guts, gore, you name it. It's just a bunch of different things now. I feel like directors and producers have gotten creative with horror movies, in my opinion.
Yes, and I can agree in some sense. I think the other thing you got to remember too with horror, and this is why horror movies get remade a lot. Comedy movies don't get remade a lot, really, because of the fact that they think of the fact that the good comedies should be, I'd argue, universal. You should be able to watch them in 1950 and find them funny, and in 2017 they should still be funny.
Yeah.
Maybe not as relevant, maybe not as socially relevant or more of a time capsule so many years later, but they should also be relevant. They should at least be funny still. Where horror movies, the thing is, The Exorcist, I'll tell you, you mentioned that one from 1973. Yeah. That scared a lot of people back in 1973. That was a frightening film, and I'd argue it still has merit, too. William Friedkin's the director on that. It's a very good film. Even in addition to, like, the Nightmare on Elm Street, Stephen King's It was a miniseries, not a miniseries, like a TV movie. Yeah. Which I like. The problem I have with It is that the first part I think is great, and the second part, when it's supposed to pay off, it doesn't. Yeah. Like, I love the first part of it when they're going through each kid's backstory. I love that. I live for it. And then they get to the second half, and it like revolves around a giant spider, and it's like, you lost me. You had me gripped, and then I flipped the disc over, and then you lost me. But the thing is, and I think what you're seeing now with horror movies too is like you see them, like you said, you would say that they definitely gotten scarier, and they've gotten gorier, and they've gotten more effective too. It's also because what scares us has changed too. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And it's the modern day sort of influences that kind of rain down on these ideas that make them films too. Like I was talking about one of the movies, Unfriended. I don't know if you saw that one.
I did see that one. That one was different.
I liked that one a lot.
Yeah.
And I liked that one. A lot of people didn't. A lot of people were making fun of it and everything, which I can understand. But you know what? For a movie that was technically, you could argue, we were talking last hour about The Wall and everything, you could argue one setting. You could argue one setting. Or at least like one, common setting, and then like five, because it takes place on a computer screen of webcams. So like five different settings, but all pretty much the same computer rooms, whatever they are. So that one I thought was very interesting and very
definitely
creepy. And like there's another movie too, like The Internet. You see The Internet kind of coming into like horror movies now too, in the influence of the
you
Internet.
definitely noticed that.
It's a really good film, and it is a little bit dated. It came out about 9 years ago. Wow, I saw this in the theater too. It's called Untraceable. I don't know if you've ever heard of this one. This is a creepy one, man. I saw it in the theater with my uncle, who then proclaimed afterwards, he said, I probably shouldn't have taken you to that movie. But we went to it, and it was got Diane Lane in it, who's a great actress. And the movie, Untraceable, revolves around a website that people visit. And the more people that visit this website, the more there's different scenarios. The more poison gets injected to a guy, the more this guy's sitting in a vat of water, the more people that log on, the more acid gets released into the water. And it's a very uncomfortable and very cringy movie. You can tell it came out in that era when they're talking, and they still talk about it, but like they came out in that era where people were like, the internet is going to be a haven for murder and drugs and everything like that. And they really milked off that fear, I'd argue. But going back to Jason Blum, though, going back to Blumhouse Productions, Blumhouse has been wildly successful, though. In an era where I always talk about, it always seems like I'm talking about doom and gloom on the show, with movies that, like next hour, I'm going to go in and talk about why King Arthur was such a catastrophic failure that the studio should have seen beforehand that it was going to be. But you look at a movie like Blum, or you look at Blumhouse Productions, and I just read you the numbers, I was giving you the optics. These movies are making a lot of money. Even a movie like, I bet you, I don't know if you've heard of this one, probably not, came out 2 years ago. It's called The Lazarus Effect.
I have heard of that.
You have heard of it. I don't want to underestimate you. I apologize. Now, The Lazarus Effect with Mark Duplass, one of my favorite actors. I love him. He's from The League. I love Mark Duplass. That movie, when it came out in theaters, you probably didn't hear too much about it. Wound up making $38 million on a $3 million budget. That's heavy profit right there. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, too, the figures that I'm reading you, too, like Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension cost $10 million to make. The Purge election year cost $10 million as well. I'm reading you these figures that's not including marketing costs. That's not including the commercials you saw, the posters you saw, the billboards you saw. That's not including those. But even with those, it's got to be like maybe a $3, $4, $5 million campaign. So Blumhouse and Universal Studios, the company that it's tied to as well, they are netting Universal Pictures, they are netting a huge profit on these movies that people are seeing, people are telling their friends to go see. You know what I mean? So it's a very interesting thing. And I would say, like, in a time when people proclaim that horror is dead, that creativity is dead, It's thriving now. The figures say it's thriving more than ever.
Right.
Wouldn't you agree?
I agree, yeah.
And you even said, too, you said that you believe that horror films are becoming more effective, at least in your mind, and
I think so.
you were seeing a lot better. What do you think of the Paranormal Activity franchise? Just get your thoughts on
Activity, that one was different. Like, just the setting of it, there were a lot of jump scares, but for me, it wasn't like a scary movie. It was just, I don't know.
Because when the movie came out in 2009, that was 10 years after the Blair Witch Project, which I'm sure you've seen.
I haven't, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, but man, I'm batting over. I'm in my 0 for 2 right now. But I mean, Paranormal Activity, that came out 10 years after the Blair Witch. You kind of know what the Blair Witch Project is, though, with the handheld camera and stuff like that. Now, Paranormal Activity, like, that came out, and that was very, like that was just enough time between the two. The last movie that came out that was done in that kind of, what people refer to as shaky cam style, the last film to do that was Cloverfield, 2 years prior, or a year prior. Where Paranormal Activity really revived that. They really brought that back. And they really showed that you could do a lot with it. And I mean, I bet you a lot of people walked out of Paranormal Activity thinking it was a documentary.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And it's funny to say, but like, you think about yourself, because you hadn't been used to seeing something like that. You know, so I mean, just to go down the list when it comes to, you know, Jason Blum's incredible roster of movies too. He's an important voice in horror, and I think he's a reason for why you're seeing a lot of horror movies nowadays. Even if you say that you're getting too many sequels, you're getting too many Paranormal Activities, you're getting too many Insidious movies. I hate to say it, but those are the movies that get you funding for movies like Get Out. Have you seen Get Out?
I have seen Get Out.
Which I love.
I thought it was great.
I think so far it's one of my favorite films of the year. But
Definitely.
That's the thing. We can complain about movies like Insidious Chapter 3 and like, oh, they're making another one. But you know what? If it funds movies like Get Out, The Belko Experiment, which is another really good film, I recommend you see that when it comes to DVD. I recommend anybody listening see that. The Belko Experiment, really good, gory movie. Kind of cross, I think the movie poster billed it as a cross between Battle Royale and Office Space. And it's a very good movie, too. But if it gets money, if these sequels and these remakes, they get money for these low-key efforts that wind up becoming our favorite films of the year, like you just said, you like Get Out a lot, that definitely means something, I think. And I think that shows that attributes a lot to Blum's success as a producer. So definitely look him up. Keep your name in mind. And he was also, I'll just say, he was also nominated for the 2014 Academy Award for Best Picture for producing the film Whiplash.
Really?
He was a producer on Whiplash, too. That was a great film. Did you see that?
That was a great movie,
yeah. I love that movie. I love Damien Chazelle, the director of that. I think he's going to be a rock star director, especially after La La Land, coming hot on the heels of La La Land. You know, and I think Miles Teller's going to be a star. I think he already is in some respects. I think he's a great actor. I think he's got a lot of prowess. I think he's got a lot of skill as a young kid. I think there's going to be a lot there. But Jason Blum, look him up, Blumhouse Productions. I think there's a huge debt of gratitude owed to him and Blumhouse that doesn't always get seen. I'm Steve Pulaski. DJ GiaMaria, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate you joining me, and I hope you can come back one of these days soon, talk more movies with me. Like I said, love to catch a movie with you or something. We could debate about it, argue about it, fuss about it, whatever we need to do. Thank you very much for coming on the show, especially at this ungodly hour. You know what I mean? So that fact is not lost on me when people come on the show that they're cutting into their sleep. They're cutting into their sleep with this, and you're like, yeah, and I'm wondering if it was worth it.